Hi everybody, I'm Rhiannon from the Epsom Bakehouse, and I'm going live today to answer another one of your bread making questions. Today I'll be talking all about how to get a brilliant crust on your bread as it bakes, just like this loaf here. So that will be my top tips to help you get a great crust on your bread as it bakes. And if you've got a bread making question that you'd like answered in a future live, then do just put a comment below this live whenever you're watching it, and let me know what your question is. And you can go back and look through other lives I've done on this page, all about bread making questions that people have asked and I've answered. So if you've got questions about, for example, how to know when your dough is kneaded enough, or how to save time, for example, when baking bread, then go back and look through the other videos. You can, once this video is finished, you can click the video tab on my Facebook page and see all the videos stored there. And as I said, if you've got a bread making question that you'd like answered, then let me know in the comments. It's always great to hear about what you bake at home and the questions that you have. And just a reminder, if you would like to find out more and get more bread making recipes, tips straight to your inbox, then you can join my mailing list, and I'll put a link to that in the comments again once this live is finished. And as always, you can join me on one of my live bread making classes as well and learn to bake your own delicious bread step by step. And these are a fantastic class. It's relaxed and fun, and classes have been given over 75-star reviews by previous students. And there's plenty of time during them to ask questions, and you can follow along with me step by step to make your dough, and find out exactly the process for making your bread. And you could learn to bake everything from baguettes to brioche, ciabatta, a crusty sourdough loaf, and even festive specials like stollen and hot cross buns. And if you know somebody who really would love to get into baking bread next year, then gift vouchers are available. And I'll pop a link in the comments below this live, so you can find out more about getting gift vouchers for all of my bread making classes. They're live online, and you can join in from home and learn step by step to make your own delicious crusty bread like this. All right, so today I'm talking all about how to get a really great crust on your bread. Now, to be honest, what defines a great crust will differ from person to person. Some people do like that really thick, chewy crust. Others want something that's quite easy to tear apart, but has that really delicious flavour in it. So there's a couple of things that you can be doing to get a great crust on your bread. And when I'm saying a great crust, I am meaning something that's relatively crunchy and crusty and gets that really great tearing sound when you break into your bread. So a few things that you can do to make sure that happens. And you don't want to be kind of having made all of that effort to make your bread and then suddenly, turns out there's no crust, it bakes, it's just flat and it's got a pale colour. It doesn't have that delicious all over golden brown colour. Yeah, this one does look a little bit dark. To me, that's not too bad, but it is a really delicious colour as well when you get that caramelisation in the crust. So the first thing that you will need to do is, first of all, let your dough rise enough but not too much. So don't let your dough overprove. One thing you can look at is it still holding its shape as it's risen in whatever shape you are making? And if you really gently poke your finger into your dough as it's rising, does it make a little dent but does still push back a bit? It doesn't collapse on itself, or your finger doesn't just spring straight out of your dough as it rises. That means it's not really risen enough. So check that first. Then, when you're ready to bake, make sure you preheat your oven to a really high temperature. So bread bakes at over 200 degrees centigrade normally, so about 400 Fahrenheit. It needs to be at a really, really high temperature, and that is to get this golden brown colour. This is all caramelisation in the crust, and it happens when there's a reaction between the protein and sugars in the dough, but it only happens at those higher temperatures in the oven. So get a nice high temperature in your oven to make sure that you can get a great crust on your bake. The next thing that you can do is introduce some steam into your oven. So when you're baking, you preheat your oven, and then just before, or just after in fact, you've put your dough in, then what I do is I have a small baking tray at the bottom of the oven, And just after I put the dough in, I very carefully pour a cup of water into that baking tray. Obviously the baking tray is hot, don't touch it or anything. It's very hot, it's preheated to the temperature of the oven, and the water almost instantly turns to steam. So you've got to be careful you don't kind of give yourself a facial or get a face full of steam, but just pour that water gently into that preheated baking tray at the bottom of your oven, and close the door as soon as you can. And that water will turn to steam, which will then condense on the coldest thing in your oven, which is, it's going to settle on the top of your dough and actually keep your dough kind of quite gelatinous and moist whilst it's still rising in the oven. So introduce some steam and it will just help your dough do that final rise. The crust won't set hard before your dough is finished rising. There won't be any untoward cracks or anything like that in it. So a bit of steam in your oven can really help create a great crust as well. And then I would also suggest, if you can, using a baking stone, or a pizza stone, a baking stone that you can put into your oven at those high temperatures. So all the heat in your oven is coming from somewhere in your oven, like an electric element or a gas flame, somewhere over here. So your dough is in the middle of your oven, your element might be up here, your gas flame at the bottom. It's not directly touching your dough, and nor do you want it to. But if you pop a pizza stone that's preheated under your dough, it will be at the temperature of the oven, and that that heated stone will be, perhaps your dough is on, say, a baking sheet or is in a tin, but it's almost in direct contact with a really hot baking stone. And again, that helps get all around direct contact. It helps get this beautiful colour underneath and all over your loaf. So it helps with that. It also helps with that final rise of your dough in the oven, which we call oven spring. I can talk about that another day. But it just really helps get that all over great bake and have that almost direct contact heat with your dough as it bakes. It gets a nice even bake all over great crust as well. So a preheated pizza stone as well, if you've got one. And one last thing you can do, if you're using a tin to bake your dough in, is in the last 5 or 10 minutes of baking, when the crust is pretty much all formed, take the dough, well, probably now a loaf, out of the tin and put it directly on a baking tray or directly onto the oven shelf. And do that last 5 or 10 minutes on the oven shelf. Again, just gets that overall great bake. All right, so that was a few tips for getting a great bake on your loaf. So let your dough rise enough so that it will get a great bake in the oven at the end. Use some steam in your oven. Use a pizza stone if you've got one. Make sure your oven is turned up to a high temperature, much higher than you would do, say, for example, for cakes. Really high temperature to bake at. And if you're baking in a tin, then you might want to take the loaf out of the tin for the last 5 or 10 minutes of the bake and put it directly onto the oven shelf or on a baking tray back into the oven. So I hope that's helpful. It'll be lovely to hear from you if you have any other questions about baking bread at home. And as a reminder, if you want to get any more tips and recipes and any other help with bread making, you can join my email mailing list, and I'll pop a link in the comments below this live once finished. Otherwise, it's been great to chat again today, and I'll be back live next Friday morning here on this page to discuss another bread making question that you have. Until then, I'll say bye for now.